Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Shutdown, burnout. Now that federal workers are back on the job and the paychecks are flowing again, things may not be as happy-go-lucky as you may think. Some workers are facing a backlog of assignments and pressure from anxious supervisors trying to get it all done. There is also a tense calm in many hallways that another shutdown could be looming in just a matter of weeks. So tonight, we're going to hear from the president of Blacks in Government and a leading workplace psychologist about how employees can manage those feelings of being overwhelmed. We'll also look at how agencies can support a workforce still reeling from the uncertainty. My guests are David Groves, he's back with us, National President of Blacks in Government, and Dr. Vanessa Weaver, organizational psychologist and host of Working It Out on WHUT TV. Thank you both for joining this conversation. And this is a perfect conversation for the two of you. I'll start with you, Dave, because if someone goes on vacation for a week, they are coming back to a lot of work. This was not a vacation. This was, 43 days of not working. I can't imagine what it would be like to come back to a pile of papers or a pile of electronic email after being off the job for 43 days. What are the workers telling you?
Well, and it's not necessarily the work, Harold, because I think our members enjoy the work they do every day. And I say that because if they didn't, they wouldn't still be there with all the mess been going on since January. Mm-hmm. But I'm concerned about our members' mental health. And I say that for the simple fact, 43 days, imagine 43 days for any civilian that's living in this life that don't get a paycheck. Imagine 40-something days of any individual living in America that don't know how you're going to feed your children. So we're going to get back pay. Let's be very clear about that. But imagine the GS7s and below, or GS9s and below, who may have to go do a payday loan. Mm-hmm. And I think what we look at it as citizens of these United States is that they're back to work. The government started operating like it never shut down. As you stated, we've been shut down for over 40 days. The pay is a small thing. Getting back to work is a small thing because we've been doing it for years. Mm-hmm. The thing is, how do we protect our mentality to where we can still serve, whether that's an air traffic controller, whether that's a person working in the VA, whether that's a person on the military front line. Mm-hmm. How do we control that to say that the people we work for support us? And every time we shut down, it's becoming harder and harder. And that's what I'm hearing every day.
Well, and all of those points are valid. And I did want to discuss that. But I guess my question was, on day one, you weren't going to work. And I'm talking about, a government worker. You were shut down. Mm-hmm. On day 44, when things returned, when you got the email that says, come back to work. So you were not working. You were not doing the job, whether you were, sitting at a desk, whether you were working on grants, whether you were working in administration. And I know, and you know this, that because I'm always marveling at my friends who say, yeah, golly, I got 100 email today. Yeah. And that's when they're on the job.
Yeah.
So multiply those 100 email by 43 days. And that's 4,300 email, let's just say. When you come back, I guess that's the thing that I'm asking. when your members talk about the volume of work that they have to catch up with, what are they telling you about that?
Well, I would say the answer would be, Harold, is that we have to manage those emails. We have to prioritize those emails. And when I say prioritize as working for the government, especially in today's society, we got to go through the top, whether that's the leader of the organization. Then we will get to the next level, which is our supervisors or frontline supervisors. Then we will get to the complaints from our constituents. So to say that we will resolve those in a day or a week or so, it's going to be a backlog. You're talking 43 days. It may be a backlog for we get to Harold Fisher on 70 days from now.
Right.
So I think that's the best answer I can give you, sir.
Not to mention the email that in your example that I would send when I was expecting to get a response on the first day back, and I still have to wait a week. And then I email, why you're back in the office. I know you're back in the office. So, Dr. Vanessa, when you talk about the stresses of returning to normal, what do those stresses look like?
Well, I just wanted to commend David for making this point, because even with all the backlog of emails that you're talking about, Harold, that's a stressor, just thinking you have to come back and try to deal with all of that. Yeah. And I think it's so important for us for society, for us to legitimize this conversation about mental health. Because what we know is that a lot of our federal employees and contractors, and even those in the private sector, are experiencing workforce trauma. I call it workforce PTSD, which speaks to the psychological injury that a person sustains when they've had some kind of acute or repeated stressor. And to the point that David made, the federal employee has been under stress since January 20th. And interestingly, because, I'm always like to look at the research, Harold, but interestingly, the Federal News Network did a survey in June, and this is before the shutdown. And they found out that, and they did it with a survey of about almost 4,000 people, which is a nice sample size. And they found out that 95% of those that took the survey said that they are under tremendous stress. That they're experiencing a lot of anxiety, a lot of trepidation about the workplace. 70% of them say they're having chronic sleep disorder issues. They're not sleeping. Many of them are saying that, they have a shorter temper, and that something like 45% of them saying they're having negative experiences with family and friends, that this is boiling over to the people that they care about that are surrounding them. Now, think of folks who felt like that in June, and then we take them to the shutdown. And that's 44 days of not knowing, number one, are you going to go back to work? And on top of that, the threat that 4,000 of those or 4,400 of those, David, you might give me the right number, we're going to lose their job. So it's not only are we shut down, but I don't know if I'm going to be one of those 4,500 people that are going to lose their job, or part of the group where they're not trying to give us any back pay. So, so it's adding stressor onto stressor. And it's one thing to say I have workforce or workplace stress, but it's another to say I have workforce PTSD, because that speaks to a more deeper chronic condition that people are feeling. And a lot of times folks are embarrassed or feel uncomfortable talking about it. So they're keeping all of this stuff bottled in. And it's coming out in all these different ways. And I'm hearing about it. And I'm seeing that people in my family have been affected by this government shutdown. And so when I talk to them, I hear it. And so it is really an issue that leadership and supervisors really need to focus on this. How do they create some psychological safety in these workplaces that allow folks to have some mental healing going on? And it is, the workforce trauma is real.
And Harold, let me say this.
Go ahead.
and I'm sorry for cutting in, but I retired last April.
Mm-hmm.
And as the great doctor said, I'm up late at night. I find myself waking up at 3 a.m. Am I doing enough for my members that still work for the federal government?
Mm-hmm.
It is very stressful. So if I'm going through that, imagine the individuals have to go back in that brick and mortar building to face the same trauma they was facing before they left.
I'm wondering also, because in our the daily coverage, the daily news coverage of this, and watching what's going on with this, Dave, that when you talk about stress, you kind of think, are they going to go back today? No. Are they going to go back tomorrow? There's a vote. There's a vote today. No, not going to happen. Next day, there's a vote today. Are they going to go back tomorrow? Nope, that's not going to happen. And so it is the push me, pull you of that. And then when it finally happens, there's no preparation for it because it didn't happen until it happened. And so have your members said in any way, shape, or form whether or not the managers who perhaps had been there waiting for this, waiting for everybody to come back, did somebody do something? Have you heard any stories about somebody doing something to help them ease back? Did somebody buy some cupcakes? Did somebody, and I'm not joking when I say that, did somebody make sure that your staff that they hadn't seen in 43 days got free lunch? Did somebody say, take a 90-minute lunch today to ease it in, or has it just been just straight no chaser?
Yeah. I would say this, sir, and great points all around. I will give the federal government some leeway in what I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm.
They did authorize most frontline supervisors, second line supervisors, and leaders to ease their employees back into work. Even though they said, to say the government shut down, they did on Wednesday. And I can't remember the exact day, but Thursday you need to come back to work. But they did say that let's ease them back and make sure they were okay to come back to work. Now, as far as the cupcakes and all that, I don't know. Because I truly believe that as a president of Blacks in Government, Project 2025 stated to us that we want to do a shock and awe. That didn't stop on January the 3rd or February the 16th. They're still doing that with us. They still playing with my members as though we're pawns in a chess game. So to say that everything is okay, Harold, I cannot agree with that. But I will agree with, at least they had some sympathy in some agencies, maybe not all, but in some, that ease them back into the workplace so they can come back on Monday and be ready to work. Talk
about that, Dr. Vanessa, if you can, because as Dave mentioned at the top of the conversation, okay, you're back to work, you're going to get back pay and all of that, but you still are dealing with what was missed, the bills that were missed, the meals that may have been cut back over the previous 43 days.
Yeah.
You find yourself in a food line, going to a food pantry to get enough food for you and your kids to eat. You had never had that experience, so you got all that memory. And that's what I'm saying, that people have been traumatized. And you just don't get over trauma by, okay, go back to work. And I would tell you, David, that several people I talked to got a call the day before and they had to report back in by noon the next day. And
right.
so there wasn't even a lot of support like you're talking about, Harold, to support a transition back into the workplace. And I think a lot of that is because even the supervisors are traumatized.
Yeah.
So we talk about the employees, and we expect our supervisors and our managers and, the leaders to have a predisposition to support us and to understand what they need to do to make easy transitions. But many of these supervisors are feeling like they're not taken care of.
Yeah.
That they don't really know what's going to happen to them. So therefore, nobody's taking care of them, and they could barely even think about how to take care of somebody else. And I'm not making an excuse for them. I'm just saying that there is just a layer upon layer of dysfunction that's, mental dysfunction that's going on in the workplace. And I think the leadership, no matter whether you Republican or Democrat, the government has to work. So the question is, what does the government, leadership of the government, need to do to make sure that there is an environment where people feel like they're respected, that they're valued, that the work that they do matters? That they're not.
Hold that point, Dr. Vanessa. I'll let you finish your point on the other side. I need to take a quick break. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is coming up next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about shutdown burnout. It's back to work for federal government workers after the 43 days of a shutdown. How can they catch up and find balance? My guests are Dr. Vanessa Weaver, organizational psychologist and host of Working It Out on WHUT-TV, and David Groves, national president of Blacks in Government. Before the break, Dr. Vanessa, you said that, the question is, what do managers do to help those workers who are returning to work ease back in? What is, from your perspective, what is the answer to that? Because whether they are senior executive service, middle managers, all the way down to the single-digit GS workers, everybody is in the same boat during this shutdown.
Mm-hmm. Well, what supervisors can do, we probably think about it as common sense, but common sense in this situation is really powerful. And the first thing that they can do is legitimize and acknowledge and legitimize for the people that report to them that they get their anxiety, they get their stress. Make it okay for them to talk about it, encourage conversations about it in your workplace, because that's so critical for people feeling like, number one, no one is trying to make me seem like I'm the one that's crazy, but also that the feelings and the thoughts and the concerns I have are really real. And I have a supervisor that is at least willing to listen to me. And then the second thing that a supervisor can do, Harold, is to have some individual contact, some team contact, and make some suggestions to people around resources that they can go to if they feel like the reaction that they're having is really intense and they need some support, to make it okay to say, you know what, I think you maybe need to go and get a coach or go and talk to a counselor or go and talk to your union rep or do something. But what it is, I want you to go and get some support and some help to make that legitimate. And then the third thing is that the supervisors can create and balance the workload so that tremendous, workload that they're coming back and they're confronted with, that can become more manageable. So there's not this expectation, like Harold said, that everything gets done now, that you catch up in the first week or the first few days. But let's look at how do we prioritize this work and how do we distribute the work in a way that makes it more manageable for our folks, because we recall with the layoffs, we got fewer people doing the same workload as the folks that they had before. So they were already feeling stressed with the amount of work that they had to do covering for other people. So now they got to figure out how do they continue doing that on top of 44 days of backlog.
Mm-hmm. Dave, Blacks in Government is a nonpartisan organization, but this shutdown has been particularly political with the finger pointing. I've never seen so much of finger pointing between the Republicans, between the Democrats, from the White House to various and sundry organizations. But as a nonpartisan organization, what's your pep talk to your members leading up to? Because if you're going, on one hand, Dr. Vanessa is recommending, yes, it's okay to talk about this. But in this climate, some would say it's not okay to talk about this.
Yeah.
So I would say this, Harold, one of the most conversation I've been having has been, and as you say, we're nonpartisan, 501c3 organization. But did the Democrats crave? And I've been having that conversation. And my conversation to the members that I've been talking to our leaders, has been, I don't know if we were going to get everything we wanted with the healthcare, still being nonpartisan. But at the same time, do we not feed our families with the SNAP, with the WIC? So it's a two-headed sword. And in this fight, as a nonpartisan organization, I think that one party really stood up for the values of healthcare. And in our community, we know healthcare is important, but at the same time, I don't think healthcare is a Democrat or a Black concern.
Exactly.
It's a United States of America concern. So I don't think the fight is over. And as I share with our members as a nonpartisan organization, the fight is not over. I think what they did was kick the can down the road, but at least we can put you on record now to say whether you believe in healthcare or not.
And I'm thinking also from a foundational perspective, when you're talking about bills, when you're talking about food pantry visits, I'm quite sure that in some offices you have some workers saying, yeah, it really doesn't matter who was responsible for this.
Sure.
Get back to work.
I'm
glad to get back to work. I'm not an elected official. So, I vote, but I'm a voting federal government worker. But this is going to happen with or without me. And I need to put my head down and get this work done, because the people that I serve aren't going to get the services that I provide as a dedicated federal government worker. And a prime example of that, you could probably say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the air traffic controllers is a prime example of that.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Weaver summed this up earlier, and I just want to go back to one of her quotes, is that I've been a national leader in Blacks in government for probably 30-some years, even though I've only been the president a year. And I've never seen more members of my organization come out and say, I had to stand in a food line. Mm-hmm. That says a lot. And my thing I've been encouraging our members with is don't be afraid to ask for help. Mm-hmm. Whether that's food, money, or mental. Mm-hmm. And I think we as a community, we got to get past that we are too proud to ask for help. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just want to leave it at that, sir.
Yeah. Dr. Vanessa, how can you set boundaries when your supervisors want everything done yesterday?
Well, that's a tough one, because a lot of people are experiencing that, because the supervisors are feeling a lot of pressure to deliver, and not a lot of empathy about how they're going to do it. And that pressure, all this stuff rolls downhill, as you know. And so, but it's important. I mean, one of the top 3 or 4 things that an employee must do is to set boundaries. And, there are different ways you could do it. I mean, obviously being diplomatic, but clear about what those boundaries are. For example, one way to set boundaries is to really sit down and have a conversation with your supervisor around what are your deliverables, and then have some discussion about how realistic are those deliverables for one person to handle, and be prepared to provide some information, data, and perspective. But you have to, and I know it's scary because, like you said, sometimes people don't want to hear it, but you have to let people know that you're prepared to fight for yourself. That you have the courage to sit down and say, look, I can deliver this. I know it's important for what you have to deliver, but I don't want to overcommit and put you in a position where you're overcommitting. This is what I can realistically do, and this is over and beyond what I did before. And so this is where I am now. Let's spend some time figuring out how the rest of this work can get done.
Yeah.
But because sometimes people feel like they have to absorb all of this themselves, and then they just fall under the weight of it. So it's not not saying something is not a winning proposition for you. I mean, it's going to be the same endpoint as if you didn't negotiate. So it really is important to set boundaries and let people know how much you can and can't do. Some of the work that my firm did, Alignment Strategies, we found that in many of these roles, they would have Black women and men. They would be doing the work of 2 or 3 people. And then when they left or got promoted, that assignment got divided into 2 or 3 different roles, and 2 or 3 different people took over what that one person was doing. And so this is not something that's just in your head. It is, people will put as much on you as they can and as you participate in it. So how do you begin to push back, negotiating, what your boundaries are, and being firm on it and keep coming back to it. If that doesn't work, then you go to your organizations like Blacks in Government to get some advice, or to your union, or to your HR organization to see what support they can give you in negotiating this, and always document.
Yeah. So, David, let's talk about some things that are happening today and some other things that we know are coming down the road. First of all, of course, there are reports that the Department of Education is really on its last legs, even though it's still going to require an act of Congress to close it, if that indeed does happen. Well, there were still people working there. Mm-hmm. They may be on thin ice, but they are still working there. That's the first thing. Tax season is coming. We are, the first of the year is a month and a half away. And we already know, and you know better than I, the cuts that the Internal Revenue Service has taken during the course of this year. Talk to me about, after January 1st, the kinds of stresses, for example, that these agencies are going to feel. 43 days of a shutdown, and fewer workers, and even the threat to shut the doors. I cannot imagine the kind of that kind of pressure doesn't make diamonds.
Yeah. The department. Let's go with the Department of Education first.
Okay.
I just want to say to my Black community, despite what they may do with the Department of Education, I think it's a bad mistake. Let me just say that up front. But we as leaders in our communities, we got to keep educating our folks. I don't care what they do with the Department of Education per se, because during this administration, they're going to do what they want to do anyway. But at the same time, it started with getting DE&I out of the education systems. Then it went to let's sue the education because they had DE&I in their administrations. Now is let's talk about getting rid of it. And Harold, you and I probably have done 3 or 4 interviews, and I always talk about Project 2025. Mm-hmm. The reason why I talk about that, sir, because if you look at that book, they told us what they were going to do. Department of Education was in there all throughout that book. So let's be very clear. Taxes, I as a president of Black Sin Government, I don't really have too much to comment on that for the simple fact that when we just did this big, beautiful bill this year, that big, beautiful bill was letting folks that violated taxes get away with more. So as far as our community,
And
I don't have no comment on there. Go ahead, sir.
About the workers within
the workers itself. I mean, I have a lot of our members as are members of the IRS chapter, and a lot of them have been affected. I don't want to see not one government employee get laid off, let alone Black Sin government member get laid off. But I would share that it affected us a lot, especially when it comes to the IRS. And I would say it affected us a lot when it comes to IRS of senior leaders in there, that career employees with the IRS. So as far as me having a comment one way or other, I mean, they done what they did. I don't know. I don't really have a clear answer other than I feel for my members and employees, sir.
Yeah. Let's talk about plans, Dr. Vanessa. And I'll share this with both of you. I remember, as it relates to the IRS, when I had a technical issue with filing or something, and that was earlier this year. And I remember calling, and I was on hold forever. I think I probably could have taken a bath and had a birthday by the time somebody picked up the phone. But when I did, when the lady picked up the phone, and she was in West Virginia, and I kind of, I kidded with her a little bit. She said, after I got my issue squared away, and I said, thank you so much for handling this. And she said, I'm trying. And I was like, yeah, well, I hope that you still have a job. And she paused and she kind of chuckled and she said, yeah, me too. Which, and I think that just kind of shows, and this was back in
February, probably.
In February, March, when I was trying to handle this issue. This is now November. I hope that lady still has her job.
Yeah.
But for those who still have their jobs and are concerned about the pressures that are coming up and all of the emotional stresses, and they're just wondering, maybe it's time for me to do something else. In this current climate, Dr. Vanessa, how do you formulate a plan to make a plan?
Well, clearly, having an exit strategy is advisable for all of us. And I think it's advisable for any person that's working to kind of think about what's the next step if. But right now, it really is thinking about what are those things that are on your bucket list that you might want to do, and how can you create some opportunities out of all of this, to do that. If in fact you felt like my mental health is at a point where I can't endure this. I was coaching a young lady, and she, she was working for one of the security agencies, and she said that the mental stress just got so much that she just quit. And my mental health is just more important. And she could see herself deteriorating, not sleeping, overeating, having a short temper, all of those, behaviors that I talked about. And she literally quit without a package. She just said, I have to exit out of here. And I'm suggesting that you start thinking about it and not walk away and don't get your benefits, whatever those are. So it really is about saying, okay, what is the kind of mental reset that I need to make that allows me to feel like I can have more control over what's happening And so I'm orchestrating this versus reacting to it. And that's a different situation. You know, what are the things that I need to start planning for and doing now that allows for me to exit? Now, the challenge is that the private sector isn't doing a whole lot of hiring either. The hiring is down in the private sector. So the opportunities aren't as vast as they might have been in another kind of economic situation. But that should not stop you from creating a plan and using your network. You know, there's so many people out here that are in our network that if they knew that you had a particular direction or there's a particular way they could support you, then they prepared to do that. And a lot of times, you know, as David mentioned earlier, sometimes people are too embarrassed to say, I'm in the situation and I need help. So really it's about stepping back and saying, okay, what do I need to do to take care of myself and my family? And the first thing is to make sure I got the right mental mindset to do this. That I'm not running away from something as much as walking to something. That's an important point. And then what's the kind of plan that I need to have, that I need to start making to make that transition? And you don't have to think of the plan all by yourself. Who are the resources in your network? There are a lot of programs out here now that are helping federal workers in their transition planning. Go and identify and use some of those resources to help you make a plan. Because a lot of times when you feel so overwhelmed, you know, making a plan is the last thing you really focus on. It is really, you know, you're so absorbed in the emotional kind of trauma that you're feeling that you can't even sometimes just stop and just say time out. You know I feel like I've been disrespected, mistreated, whatever. But, you know, I can't let that, you know, control me. I have to now take control of the situation and make some decisions on what's best and start orchestrating a plan.
I think that's a really important point and something that a lot of people needed to hear, Dr. Vanessa, because, as you said, in the example of the young lady, she just decided, I'm out of here. She, you know, left her pencil sharpener on the desk, left her blotter on the desk, computer was still up and rolled out.
Didn't even negotiate for her benefits that she might have been able to take with her.
Yeah. And I think that is such an important piece of advice, where even if the day is the day that you're ready to roll out, just take a break in your head and plan to roll out next Tuesday, not today.
Not today. Or call Blacks in government and talk to some of them to get some of the coaching and advice. I mean, there are resources out here.
Go ahead, Dave, because I was going to ask you the same thing. And I know the last time during the shutdown and we were talking, you were talking about some of the resources and support. And so I'm curious what kind of transitional support or resources Blacks in government has, or your thoughts about that.
And we're still providing resources, but I think back to my mother. And my mom used to always tell me as I was growing up through the government ranks, all money is not good money. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to realize what she was saying. Mm-hmm. And what I tell our members, if you're stressed out, if you're not feeling appreciated, that money's not the money you need. As Dr. Weaver said, start planning your exit route. And we as Black professionals have to always have an exit route. I think I was on the show last week, and one of the things I shared was I find it hard to believe that my Black sisters sometimes dispute and fight each other more than any other race. And why? It's enough for all of us to get ahead. So as far as us giving out information, I think I shared that Governor Westmore, I can't think, I'm looking at him right now in my face, the pastor in Atlanta, but there's a lot of folks that provide us information to share with our members that we're still doing. And my thing is, I know that the government was that airway to the middle class.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that's the only way to the middle class.
Correct.
And that's what we got to look at right now, because the government is not friendly to us, I think, and again, I'm speaking on behalf of David Groves, not Blacks in Government, but I think when the government started all these cutbacks, they thought they was hurting African Americans. But all those good cushy jobs come along was not African Americans. There was a lot of white females took those jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, we got to find a way to control our own life. I'm telling our folks, you're educated. Open your own business. Start being an entrepreneur. There's nothing wrong with that. We just got to think outside the box that we have a plan. I don't want us to exit tomorrow. Don't get me wrong. But we have to have a plan to make sure we are guiding our own future.
Yeah.
Dr. Vanessa, I have a few minutes. I'll let you have a final word when you take a look at the present landscape where we are. Shut down over, government funded until the end of January, 2.5 months from now. 2.5 months from now. Thanksgiving next week, Christmas coming up, Kwanzaa, all of that. What is your sage advice for those who are still feeling the pressure?
Well, first of all, my sage advice is, first of all, acknowledge that you're feeling the pressure. Don't be in denial about that. And understand the impact that pressure is having on you. You might want to ask your kids or people who are close to you, how is my behavior? How do you see me handling this situation? Get some feedback and then get some resources. If in fact you're under workforce PTSD, go and get some resources to help you, because the mindset is the real battle here. If you're not in control of your mindset, it's hard for all the other things to kind of operate in ways that you want. So getting control of that mental mindset, understanding where you are, being honest about it, not being so prideful that you can't or won't reach out for help, I think is critical. And then second, identify the resources out here. David just talked about a lot of resources. I know your station has listed them, Harold. So really go and access resources to help you figure it out. You might need to say, hey, I am stuck and I need help to just get unstuck. That's a healthy mindset because you're dealing with where you are. Protect your mindset. That's my advice.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vanessa Weaver, David Groves. I really appreciate you making yourselves available for this conversation. It was really important that we hear from both of you so soon after the end of the shutdown. The shutdown is over for now, but the issues still remain. So again, thank you all so very much.
And I thank the Daily Drum for having such real conversations and creating a safe space for real talk. I just really commend your station and you, Harold.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so
Likewise.
much. We got to keep people employed and with a good mindset.
Right.
Before we close, sir, I do want to Jamal Bryant.
Yes, that's what you were talking about. Jamal Bryant.
I'm trying to remember his name too, Harold.
Yeah. That is the Daily Drum for this Tuesday, November 18th. I'm Harold Fisher.